Okay, let's dive into something pretty intense today.
Definitely.
What happens when the people meant to enforce the law are the ones caught breaking it? It really flips the script, doesn't it?
It's a really powerful scenario. And often um, uncomfortable, the most revealing moments, often when they realize they're caught
Yeah,
and how they handle that role reversal, especially, in an interrogation.
absolutely. So this deep dive, we're focusing only on specific accounts, details from the source material you shared. We're looking at police officers who ended up on the wrong side of the badge
Right.
and the, well, sometimes surprising ways it all played out.
Exactly. We're treating these accounts as the facts for this discussion. The specific details of these cases, what actually happened when the focus shifted onto the officer themselves.
Right. And our mission here, really, is to guide you through these sources, pull out the key bits of the aha moments, maybe the facts that make you stop and think,
Mm.
and what these specific examples tell us about, well, human behavior under extreme pressure, especially when your whole world is kind of collapsing.
And you're suddenly on the other side of the law you swore to uphold.
Precisely.
Oh.
So this is your shortcut to getting informed on these particular documented cases.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Case number 1. It involves the detective Michael Neely, and it starts with a truly bizarre scene.
Bizarre is putting it mildly. So the source material says Neely was found in a hotel room,
Okay.
right, after some kind of conference.
Yeah.
But the kicker is how he was found, sitting on the dead body of his boss, police chief Johnny Miller.
How?
And yeah, the account mentions they'd been drinking really heavily the night before.
Heavily might be an understatement. The sources detail their blood alcohol levels incredibly high, around 0.3, maybe even higher.
And just for context, 0.3 is,
Oh,
that's serious, right?
Oh, absolutely. 0.4 BAC is often fatal. At 0.3, you're looking at serious risk of alcohol poisoning, probably blacking out, losing consciousness, completely out of control.
So neither of them was thinking clearly. Something happened in that room. Chief Miller ends up dead, and Neely. He wakes up in custody.
Right. Likely zero memory of how he got there, what went down. Just finds himself in, the kind of situation he usually investigates.
That must have been incredibly disorienting.
That disorientation is key here. The interrogation starts, he's confused, probably got a massive hangover. Answers are short, minimal, but then the detectives drop the bomb. It's his homicide investigation. The victim, his chief,
And that changes everything.
instantly. He knows the drill. His training kicks in.
What does he do?
He immediately invokes his right to silence, nothing to say to you, just like that, trying to protect himself.
Standard procedure from his perspective.
But the detectives interviewing him, they're trained too. They don't waste time. They hit him with the reality, second-degree murder charge, no bond,
Oof.
and your wife's been notified.
Wow. Just pile on the pressure.
Exactly. Designed to crack that composure. And the sources say they followed that up with an offer, kind of a trade.
Like what?
We'll tell you what happened, basically, if you cooperate. They're playing on his likely memory gap, his confusion.
Smart tactic. Does it work?
Well, it's fascinating. That pressure, combined with him apparently having no memory, it seems to break through his trained silence. The accounts show his demeanor shifts.
How so?
Faced with this impossible situation, waking up in jail, accused of killing his boss, blackout drunk, he starts engaging.
Engaging how?
Yeah.
Like confessing.
Not confessing, no, more like he can't stand not knowing. He starts trying to piece it together with them, almost joining his own investigation to figure out what he did.
Wild. He's trying to solve the mystery of his own actions.
Pretty much, because he genuinely seems unable to recall it. And the investigators, they have other details too, right?
Yeah, the sources mentioned noise complaints.
Exactly. Neighbors heard laughing, yelling earlier. Then later it changed. Grumbling, grunting sounds.
Okay.
And then, chillingly, a male voice saying, "Mike, stop! Mike, stop!"
That paints a very grim picture of things escalating. But Neely kept saying he didn't remember.
Right. Repeatedly claimed no memory, no ill will towards Miller. But the observation from the sources is telling. No remorse seen at that stage. Just confusion and concern for his own situation.
And the outcome.
Ultimately, based on the evidence presented in the sources, he was booked, went to trial, and was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder.
A stark example. Extreme impairment, shock,
Mm.
overriding all that training.
Exactly. Leading him to sort of try and fill in the blanks with the investigators.
Okay, let's shift gears. A different kind of case, less severe maybe,
Yeah.
but revealing about using authority to dodge consequences. Captain James French.
Right, Captain James French, Oklahoma City PD. This account starts with him being stopped for drinking and driving.
Yeah.
He was leaving a poker game, apparently swerving across lanes pretty badly.
So a standard DUI stop initially, but the confrontation, that's where it gets interesting, according to the source.
That's the crucial part. French immediately identifies himself as a captain, pulls rank, and then explicitly asks the officer to turn off his body camera.
Wow. Straight to trying to use the badge to get out of it and hide the evidence.
Precisely. Hoping his status gets him a pass, basically. Starting with making the interaction disappear.
But the stopping officer,
Yeah.
the source, highlights his response, right?
Yes, and it's key. The officer refuses point blank, says he treats everyone the same. Doesn't matter if you're, and this is a quote from the source, a gangbanger or the president of the United States.
Strong words.
He apparently went on saying he wouldn't treat a captain differently than some Southside loco or some pedo, really emphasizing equal treatment.
So that officer held the line, didn't bend for a superior.
Exactly. Showed real integrity. He just proceeded with the standard field sobriety tests, balance, walk and turn.
Which French struggled with.
The sources note he did struggle with them, yeah.
So what happened to him?
He was arrested. As per procedure, the outcome, according to the sources, was suspension from his captain role, and he faced the usual DUI penalties. Fine, maybe a few months in jail reported.
So unlike Neely's confusion, French went straight for authority.
Right, tried to use a shield.
But it hit a wall because the arresting officer wouldn't play along.
Yeah, it shows that accountability can happen, that not everyone looks the other way, even for a boss.
Okay, from an immediate stop caught on camera to a case that took decades. Forensics playing a huge role here. Detective Stephanie Lazarus.
Yeah, this one goes way back. The source material looks at the 1986 murder of Sherry Rasmussen.
Right.
At first, it seemed like maybe a burglary gone wrong. She was shot 3 times. But the case went cold for years.
How many years?
23 years, believe it or not. Then DNA. Evidence preserved from the original scene finally gets tested with modern tech, and it points to a shocker.
Oh.
Stephanie Lazarus, an active LAPD detective.
Wow. A detective herself. What was the suspected motive?
The sources outline a pretty classic scenario, sadly, a love triangle.
Wow.
Sherry Rasmussen was married to a man named John Ruetten. Lazarus had dated Ruetten before the marriage and apparently still had strong feelings for him.
Okay, so motive established. But how do they even get her in for questioning without tipping her off? She's LAPD.
Well, the tactic described in the sources was quite clever. They didn't tell her it was about the cold case.
What did they say?
They told her they needed her expertise, her help on an art theft case, something unrelated.
Okay.
And to make it seem legit, needing privacy for this confidential case, they suggested meeting in an interrogation room, said it was the best place not to be overheard.
Smooth. Puts her on familiar turf, but for the wrong reason.
Exactly. Calculated. Once she's in there, the detectives gradually, very subtly, shift the conversation, start dropping details related to the Rasmussen case, and then they mention the ex-boyfriend's name, John Ruetten, watching her reaction.
And how does she react, according to the sources?
Visibly. As she starts putting it together, realizing she might be the focus of this cold case homicide chat. The sources describe faster breathing, defensive language, becoming physically agitated, erratic movements.
The penny drops. She knows it's not about art theft.
Right. She starts questioning if she's a suspect. Then comes the big ask.
The DNA.
The DNA sample. And her reaction, the sources say, was hesitant. Things like, maybe I probably need to talk to a lawyer. She clearly grasped the gravity.
But did she give it?
She did, ultimately. The speculation in the sources is that she might have gambled, hoping it would somehow clear her.
A gamble that failed.
Dramatically. According to the accounts, just 5 minutes after providing the sample, she was arrested.
5 minutes. Wow.
And years later, after a trial, a jury found her guilty. First-degree murder, sentenced to 27 years.
Incredible story. Shows how patience, DNA tech, and smart interviewing can crack a case decades later. Even with a suspect who knows the system.
Her reaction in that room really speaks volumes about the shock of exposure after all that time.
Okay, let's move to a more recent case. Officer Jalen Fleer.
This one, the sources say, started with a Crime Stoppers tip back in April 2020.
Okay.
The report was disturbing. A San Diego police officer was allegedly communicating inappropriately with a local child.
Right. An investigation followed.
Yeah, a 2-month investigation pointed towards Officer Jalen Fleer. And the start of his interrogation, as described, was intentionally low-key.
How so?
They explicitly told him he wasn't detained, free to leave any time. The detective interviewing him adopted this really friendly, almost bubbly persona.
Trying to disarm him, get him comfortable.
Seems like it. Lowered the defenses before dropping the hard evidence. But that friendly tone didn't last long.
What changed it?
The detective showed Fleer a picture, something linked to the allegations about him communicating with a young female on Snapchat.
And his reaction?
The sources describe visible stress. He leaned forward, clasped his hands tight, jaw clenched. Clear nonverbal signs he knew that picture was bad news.
He recognized it.
Seemed like it. And then came this incredibly specific detail, really nailed things down, the Snapchat account name.
What was it?
It was J1782Element.
Sounds random.
Right.
Yeah, just letters and numbers.
But investigators dug into it. And according to the sources, it wasn't random at all. It was a combination. His college baseball jersey number was 17.
Okay.
His high school jersey number was 82.
Whoa.
And his high school graduation year was 2011.
J178211. That's incredibly specific. Ties it directly to him.
Very hard to explain away. And under that pressure, the sources say he admitted sharing images and videos, said he shared a lot, mentioned videos of having fun and something about an ex-girlfriend having one too.
He started talking.
He did. But shortly after those admissions, the sources note, he asked for a lawyer.
Invoked his rights.
Yep. And the response was immediate. He was handed a search warrant right then and there.
What did it cover?
His DNA, his phone, his car, and that search, according to the source material, yielded a mountain of evidence.
So the digital trail was key.
Absolutely. He was eventually charged with, I think, 20 felonies. Really serious charges involving kids under 14 and 16. Lewd acts, pandering, engaging in crime with a child.
And the sentence?
12 years. This case really shows how those digital footprints, even seemingly anonymous usernames, can become damning evidence when investigated thoroughly.
Okay, one last case. This one involves an officer who really knew the playbook, and it has a pretty shocking twist at the end. Officer Grant Hardin.
Right. This starts with a murder in Gateway, Arkansas. A man named James Appleton shot in his car in a parking lot.
Ready witnesses.
A passerby saw a white Chevrolet Malibu speeding away from the scene. That's the critical initial lead, according to the source.
Gateway's tiny, right?
Yeah, like 400 people. So a white Chevy speeding from a murder. It didn't take long to trace it.
To
Grant Hardin, a 50-year-old local police officer. And not just any officer. He was the former chief of police there.
former chief. Okay, so interviewing him must have been tricky.
Extremely. The detectives, Chamberlain and Cordiero, knew they were dealing with someone who understood tactics, rights, everything.
And what was Hardin's approach?
Immediate silence. The sources say right after being read his Miranda rights, he just shut down. Not going to say anything, have the right to be silent. Even said something like, "We can do this all night."
Stonewalling from the start. Did he give any reason?
Claimed he felt sickly, maybe in an attempt to delay or seem unfit for questioning.
So the detectives tried different angles.
Oh, yeah. They tried leaving him alone in the room, letting the silence work on him, tried putting him at ease, just need to rule you out, appealed to logic, showed frustration, nothing worked.
His silence was his shield.
Legally, yes. But it definitely raised suspicion, didn't help his case in that regard. And his alibi was weak, too. His wife apparently just said she thought he was home spreading grass seed, not exactly airtight.
But there was more evidence.
A crucial piece. An eyewitness, Andrew Tillman. And the source notes Tillman had known Hardin since they were kids.
So, a reliable ID.
Tillman positively ID'd Hardin at the scene and added this really disturbing detail. He said he saw Hardin wave at him right before the shot was fired.
Wave. Wow. That's chilling.
Incredibly chilling. But even with that, Hardin's stayed silent in the interrogation room. They tried emotional appeals, showed him a picture of his wife and daughter, talked about facing mistakes for his family.
Nothing.
Nothing. Then Detective Cordiero, the female detective, tried a different approach. Calmer, more sympathetic, tried to build rapport.
Oh.
The sources describe her reminiscing about times they'd worked together, him backing her up on calls, talked about just normal stuff, sleep schedules, TV shows.
Did he engage with that?
He did, interestingly. He'd talk about the mundane things, the everyday stuff.
But not the case.
The second the conversation turned back to Appleton's murder, or that day's events, bam, shut down again. Total silence.
So after hours of this.
After hours of back and forth, getting nowhere on the actual case, he finally asked for a lawyer, which formally ended the interrogation.
So the interview itself yielded nothing incriminating from him.
Correct. But despite maintaining silence, the evidence must have been strong enough. He eventually pleaded guilty, first-degree murder. got 21 years.
Did he ever say why he killed Appleton?
Sources say no, never revealed a motive.
Okay, but you mentioned a twist.
Ah, yes. Here's the real shocker. Unearthed during his prosecution for the murder, his DNA. It matched an unsolved rape case.
What? When?
From 1997, nearly 20 years before the murder. The assault took place in a teacher's lounge bathroom at an elementary school, Frank Tillery Elementary.
1997. How did they connect it after all that time? Statute of limitations.
Well, the sources explain that back in 2003, Rogers police had gotten what's called a John Doe warrant based on the DNA profile itself from the 1997 crime scene.
Okay.
That legally preserved the ability to prosecute, linking it to an unknown suspect profile, bypassing the usual time limits.
So when Hardin's DNA was taken for the murder investigation...
Bingo. It hit that 2003 John Doe warrant, a direct match.
Unbelievable. So he got more time for that.
Yep. An additional 14 years for the rape stacked onto the murder sentence. Total of 35 years.
And there was something else in the sources about his career.
Yeah. A final detail mentioned is that before he became chief in that tiny town of Gateway, he'd actually been fired or resigned from 3 other police departments.
Wow. That suggests a pattern long before the murder or the revealed rape.
It certainly raises questions. This case is maybe the most complex. Deliberate silence, a key eyewitness, and then this decades-old cold case DNA match revealing a whole hidden history.
It really shows how different threads of investigation can suddenly come together, sometimes in totally unexpected ways.
Absolutely. These 5 cases, drawing just from the source material you provided, they give such a varied and, intense look at officers crossing that line.
You really see the different ways they get caught, don't you? Like Neely, caught literally in the act's aftermath. French, stopped by an officer who wouldn't bend. Lazarus, decades later by DNA. Fleer, by a digital trail. Hardin, by an eyewitness, and that cold case DNA.
And the interrogations themselves show such a range of reactions. Neely's confusion, almost trying to help solve it himself. French's immediate attempt to use his rank. Lazarus's visible anxiety and eventual hesitant cooperation. And Hardin's absolute trained silence.
Yeah, stonewalling, but also confirming suspicion in a way.
Right. And looking at these specific details, from these documented examples, it really matters because it highlights how accountability happens. Sometimes it's forensic, sometimes digital evidence, sometimes a witness, sometimes just one officer's integrity.
It also shows the unique challenge investigators face when the suspect knows the interrogation playbook inside out.
Definitely. And maybe it leaves us and you listening with something to think about building on these specific accounts.
Yes, sir.
Well, look how heavily these cases relied on very specific things falling into place. DNA being there and tested correctly years later, an eyewitness who knew the person and spoke up, an officer refusing to be swayed by rank, a digital identifier that was surprisingly personal.
Right, if any one of those elements was missing.
Exactly. So what does it mean when accountability, especially for someone in power, hinges so much on these specific, sometimes almost lucky circumstances? What questions does that raise about the broader systems, for situations where maybe there isn't clear DNA or a witness or that digital footprint?
Yeah, something definitely worth considering.